In this episode of Defining Moments Podcast, you get to meet Bryan Bedford, the CEO and Managing Director of the Bedford Agency. What does the Bedford Agency do? They do sports business consulting and events, recruiting affiliate programs, recruiting education and advisement. They give you the truth, they deliver the stats, the analytics, the insights. They get you into the recruiting process, they help you through the recruiting process. They want to get to know you as a student athlete, but more importantly, they want to get to know you. They want to help you find your education purpose. What's your why? Where are you going to go? To me, it seemed like a no-brainer. That's why Bryan and I connected. He came on the podcast. He shared a great story from his love of sports when he was 9 to Oklahoma City 89ers game, to TCU recruiting, to SNU, to start helping start their football program. He delivers stats, analytics, the truth to you. But what about the behind the scenes? What is Bryan really like? What's his story? Where are some of the setbacks? What did he learn? What is he learning? Where is he going? My name is Wong Lam. Welcome back to Defining Moments Podcast. And today's special guest is Mr. Bryan Bedford. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks,
sir.
brother. Great to be here.
Absolutely. I don't know if you remember this. A couple of months ago, probably about 2.5 months ago, do you remember how we kind of started talking?
I don't. So
Okay.
Refresh me.
Yeah, so we were on Twitter. It was, I think it's JD Reynolds and Rufus Alexander were talking about recruiting, and I think you were talking about recruiting too. And so I was reading the thread, and I was like, man, this sounds like a cool podcast. And so I was like, hey, you all three should get on a podcast and podcast this thing out. And so that's how I started follow you, and met up with you a few weeks later.
Yeah.
And now you're in the studio.
Yeah. There you go. But you got a better memory than I do. Awesome.
Yeah. You're married, 16 years, 2 daughters. You're the managing director of the Bedford Agency.
Yep.
There's so many things that you have done or are currently doing. My first question is, man, how are you doing? How's your day?
I'm doing great. Just got done celebrating 16 years of marriage on Friday, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And my kids are just growing like a weed, I guess, as the analogy goes. And we're just trying to pour into them this summer, and that's been really fun to kind of see both my girls just, they're just growing up, which is a little sad if you're a parent, but at the same time, it's also kind of cool to see them kind of coming of age. And one will be a freshman and the other will be a 4th grader. And so they're kind of going through those different periods of their life. And we've got vacation coming up here in a week. And so kind of got beach on the brain, which is not a bad thing with the holidays coming up. But so life's good. And but thanks for asking. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I've listened to you on Sports Talk. I think it's KTOK 1400 AM station here locally. Yep. And I grew up listening to KTOK because my parents are big time KTOK News 1000 listeners. And so anyways, listen to one of your podcasts. And what I really enjoy about it, man, is not only do you give facts, but you give the stats that back up facts. So what does this tell me about, like, can you explain your stats? How do you come up with all these stats and why these stats are important to you?
Yeah, so maybe to help kind of set some context, right? A lot of what we do with the Bedford Agency is, it's kind of, there's pieces and parts to the business. So part of it is, we've hosted some events, we've produced some events that we've done, we've consulted with different companies in sports. The other piece of it is really around recruiting and what recruiting looks like today. How families are going to go through that process, what's realistic, what's that evaluation process look like, and so forth. And, one of the first things that we try to do when we do that piece of our business is really have a pretty prescriptive conversation about what's realistic.
Mm-hmm.
We get caught up in the Twitter sphere, and you see a lot of different things out there about kids trying to go play in college and quote unquote getting offered and all these kinds of things. The reality is that there is a number of there's just a number of facts, right, to your point, that really speak to kind of what that really looks like.
Right.
So if you kind of, I'll just give you a couple here to kind of whet your appetite to
Yeah.
get us started. And if you think about it in general, and this is regardless of what sport you play, your odds of playing sports in college are really less than 3 to 5%.
Yeah.
So not everybody gets an opportunity to do that. And then within each of those sports, there are certain divisions or levels of play from Division 1 all the way to NAI and Division 3 and several levels in between there. And there's aspects of your ability to get recruited inside of each of those. And so the reality is that it's the odds of you playing at a Arizona State and Oklahoma, Michigan, or whatever in just about any sport, they're pretty finite. They're very, very small. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't shoot for it. Doesn't mean we shouldn't take every opportunity to see if we can make that happen.
Right.
But we should also be grounded in, what are some other options, right? And so that's the very top end of the market. And when you think about playing in college, but there are many other options that are at Texas State and North Texas and Tulsa and lots of places in between, let alone all of the state schools that surround each of these states and everywhere in between. And so just try to be really grounded with people and let them have an open mind and an open perspective, and then give them an honest evaluation of, where their son or daughter can play and what do we think is realistic for them. And that then hopefully, allows them to save some money and some time and be purposeful in the types of things that they do at an early age so that they're ready to kind of maximize every opportunity. So that's just a couple of stats, but that gives you kind of an idea of, and you can get a lot of this stuff online. There's a lot of different things that are out there, but not everybody knows where to go to get it. And then, when you look at that and you kind of process that, not everybody understands really what that means too. So, but go into all the weeds on all that stuff, but hopefully it gives you an idea where we're headed.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. You're right. It's 2019, so we can go online and get all this information. However, I feel like a lot of people would agree, is that how do I know if it's real or not, these stats that I see online, when if I can have a in-house, in-office conversation with a subject matter expert,
right, and
you can help guide me, I think that's better off, because face-to-face communication is important.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and that's it's why kind of the premise of what started what we're doing now is because we had just in my background working in this space, a lot of people would say, little Johnny wants to try to play college football or run track or play college basketball, and can you help us, and what does that mean? And we actually had people that actually know me that said we'd pay you to do this. And, kind of that backhanded compliment actually got us kind of into doing this, which was, they want a trusted advisor, right? They want someone to say, they really just want your money to come to camp. They're not really recruiting you, or and sometimes that's hard to give kind of the honest facts and truth.
Yeah.
But I think that takes some cycles and allows people to be purposeful in their work. And so, I mean, I think it's just a part of the process that every family needs to understand. But many times, most of these families will go through that process one time. And so just like, I don't know about you, but I don't do my taxes myself.
Right.
And if I was to go to, if I was to get in a civil case and from a legal perspective, I probably wouldn't represent myself.
Right.
I would seek counsel on both those cases. Well,
absolutely.
I think the same thing applies when you're thinking about recruiting, when it could be tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you have someone that you could consult with and advise you through that process? And I think families are really waking up to saying, we need some help.
Yeah. In your experience, how early does a recruiter start recruiting a kid? Let's just talk football.
Yeah, sure.
College football. How early does that process start? And then when does a parent come to you and say, hey, man, Bryan, I need some help?
Yeah, so there's a couple different aspects of it. Most of your major colleges will actually utilize third-party services to gather and pull information, especially on those, 10th grade, 9th grade, and even to some degree some 9th, 8th graders. they'll pull some national data and leverage some third-party resources to gather that information.
Gotcha.
And most parents don't even understand that, right? They're
Right.
making evaluations for you independently of the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's just say it's, company A,
Yeah.
and they're out evaluating, and they're, going to camps, and they're getting film, and they're talking to coaches, and they're doing their process. They're basically like, they're a hired extension of the staff, because the staff can only be a certain size. They only have the NCAA's put limitations, but they haven't really limited all the other third-party entities that can evaluate.
Mm-hmm.
And so each school will say, we think we need 2 or 3 other resources or 2 or 3 other companies to gather the kind of information that we want. And they mainly do that for early identification of kids. So again, company A goes out and scours Texas and Oklahoma and Ohio and California and Florida and whatever other state. And maybe they've got, they've got all the top ninth graders in the country, or in a certain part of the Gulf South, or whatever region that you want to recruit in.
Yeah.
And so you've got, their list. It's a list of those kids that are at that age, and they'll put them in the database and say, company A has rated them as a Division I guy or a high major guy, or whatever the ranking system is. But let's just say they're a Division I guy. Well, if you're Oklahoma and you subscribe to that list, or you're Texas and you subscribe to that list, you get kind of you've been identified early, and you're kind of on the radar.
Right.
That's one way. The second way is all of these camps. So, you see the big push the first 2.5 weeks of June, and then you'll see a little bit of a push the last week of July before training camp starts or fall camp starts, where kids are coming to these schools and they are being proactively, getting in front of these coaches. And so, in that process, again, kind of that same window of time where they get, an early identification. They may have a kid in camp and he's a ninth grader, and maybe they're not ready to offer him or anything, but they see him for the first time. They're like, wow, this kid's 15. We need to follow him the next couple of years and kind of see how he evaluates. Most of the core evaluations will happen typically in your junior year of high school.
Okay.
You'll see some that happen before that. I'm not going to lie. There's some that'll happen. If you're really, really kind of the 1% of the 1%, you're getting offered in football specifically after your sophomore year. Many of your Olympic sports, it happens, freshman, sophomore year. That's pretty normal. But in football, it's typically your body's still got to kind of develop. And so you need a little bit more time. I mean, you're just now kind of turning 16, or, some of them even aren't 16 yet. So they'll typically wait until after your, kind of your junior year. But so that's that window. And a lot of people don't realize that, especially in major college football, that there's actually third-party services that are evaluating you. So they could they could be giving you a grade even before you show up on campus.
Oh man!
And if you have that grade going into the camps or onto those campuses, it's great.
Yeah.
But it actually can work to your disadvantage, which is they're not being mean. They're just being honest. They're evaluating you, saying, okay, I know what Ohio State wants, or I know what Michigan wants. And you're 5'5" and 135 pounds. You can't, you don't have the measurables that are there. So they all kind of generally have a good plan of attack, but that's kind of generally how that process works.
Oh man.
So it can get a little complicated.
Yeah. You just are celebrating your 3rd year at the Bedford Agency, correct? So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
What has led up to this agency? The reason why I ask is you're in your 3rd year, going on your 4th, and hopefully for a very long time, but your 3rd year. So what has led you to the Bedford Agency?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, but a good one, in the sense that I've been in the sports and entertainment space for over 20 years. And it actually even goes back before this, and we were passing notes back and forth on this. I mean, for me, I remember the first time that I was really interested in kind of working in sports and entertainment. I was 10 years old. My uncle, my cousin, and my grandfather, we got in the lottery for the NCAA Final Four. And the way that worked back in the day was you had to kind of prepay for your tickets. And if you won your lottery spot, then they charged your, they charged your card kind of deal. Okay. And if not, then they rebated you the money, but you had to prepay for everything.
Wow.
And you had to do it like a year in advance. It was kind of old school, right? But this is 1986, and for me, it was an opportunity to. I got to go to the Final Four. I was 10 years old, and so it was Duke, it was Kansas, it was LSU, and it was Louisville. And so I remember going to old Reunion Arena in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
back when the Final Four was in, an actual arena, not in a football stadium.
Yeah.
And I was just intrigued at the time to understand, like, how does this all work? Like, who makes the popcorn?
Yeah.
How did the goals get out there when 2 days ago they had a hockey game or they had a rodeo or whatever it was, right? And who takes the tickets, and why are these T-shirts here and like, how does the printing work? And they just named the teams a couple days ago, and I was just intrigued behind the business of sports at a really, really early age. And I knew when I went to college as an athlete that I was going to work in sports, and so all of my internships and practicums and my early jobs in sports, all of that kind of led up to really kind of a body of work over 20 years that then is now as I've continued to be kind of wear two hats, both in the role I have now with the Bedford Agency, but outside of that with other work that I have. It's been an opportunity to really combine kind of all those things that I've done with recruiting, with events and camps and consulting and sales and all those kinds of things. And it's the ability to really kind of create an asset that is kind of wholly, mine and our families. And to really kind of build it organically. And that's what's been fun, is to kind of build an asset that, it's ours. We get to create it. We get to mold it. And, we intentionally started one area, and we've kind of pivoted and done a few new things and taken on some new challenges. And we've, looked at what's the risk profile of this versus this. And that's been really fun to kind of organically grow something. And, over time, I'd love to be able to be in a position where this can be the platform that I use to, have a, completely second career outside of other things. But, that'll take some time, and we know that. And so on my 40th birthday, decided now's the time to go be an entrepreneur. And so it's been fun. It's been a fun ride. We've got a long ways to go. But the good thing is that we don't have to be in a rush. We don't have to be in a hurry. We can be very intentional about what we're doing here. We can be pretty picky about the kinds of projects and the kinds of opportunities that we want to take on. And I think that's a good spot to be in, because then you get to do the things that you like, work on cool stuff, be around cool people, take advantage of those things, and not have to just figure out, just take on projects and responsibilities that don't kind of line up with the things that you want to do that are fun. And so that's been kind of cool to kind of organically grow it. So that's probably more than you asked for, but hopefully it gives you kind of gives you context to kind of where I started and what's led to this journey for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's an awesome answer. The reason why I say awesome is you use words like intentional or purposeful, and you're not in a rush, right? There's no finish line. So this is going to be an ongoing thing. And what I'm intrigued about is going back to 10 years old, Reunion Arena, watching the Final Four, and being interested in how's the popcorn made? How are the tickets printed? How are they ushering out a ice rink from a hockey game to a Final Four weekend in Reunion Arena?
Yeah, and I don't know that I have a great answer for it, because if I look back on it, I mean, the whole sports business side of things, it's fairly mature now. But when I was interested in it, like, I was the only one that was like, well, I want to work in sports. Like, I didn't know anybody else that wanted to do that.
Right.
Now I talk to colleges, and I'll go speak at a sports marketing class, or I'll get direct messaged on Twitter or something like that. And there's just oodles of kids that, they want to work in sports or whatever. I think part of that has to do with the maturity of the industry. You've got a lot more publications. You've got more newsletters. You've got, there's business elements of every major publication. ESPN's has a sports business writer. The Athletic has a sports business writer. Sports Business Journal's now been in publication for 25, 30 years. So you look at all of these kind of surrounding assets that really weren't in place when I was a kid. But now for like my kids, like they just think it's been there forever,
right?
Which makes me sound old, and I really don't think I'm that old. I mean, I've got to be like 25, right? I mean, this can't be. But I look at this and say, for me, it was just about like I was a sports, and I loved doing sports when I was a kid, and I just knew that that old saying of work on something that is your passion, and you'll never work a day in your life. Like I was like, all right, well, I like sports, and I think I can do that, and so that's been fun, and I've been blessed or lucky or whatever you want to say to be around people that in my career have just helped me along the way, and that's been really cool. I mean, really fun stories about people that took a bet on me at a really early age. And that has allowed me to kind of propel to, a 20 plus year body of work in 3 teams, a couple different technology companies, working in sports and entertainment. And I'm going to keep doing that and grow this at the same time. And it's been a cool ride.
Yeah, you said 3 teams. What 3 teams are we talking about?
Yeah, so I did a stint in minor league baseball. Worked for the Oklahoma City Redhawks, Oklahoma Redhawks, back when we built the ballpark here in Oklahoma City, 97 through 99, in a couple different roles, from account manager and season and group tickets and sponsorship to. I did promotions. I was a game day MC, literally.
Wow.
With a mic during the 3rd inning, singing the Kit Kat song, done all of that, which maybe now doesn't surprise you. You didn't know that, but that I did do that at one point in time. I was in my 20s, so I had a good excuse for that.
That's awesome.
But so that was senior in college through kind of my first year out of college doing that. Went back to my alma mater, Southern Nazarene, when we started the program, May of 1999, and was there 3.5 seasons through kind of the start of a college football program.
Wow.
And so that was totally different, cool, scary. I was 21 as a director of football operations. I knew nothing about it, never played a down of football in my life. And so was blessed because my college track coach became my boss and was the head football coach, and my high school track coach became our defensive coordinator.
Wow.
And so being part of the orchestration of some of that was pretty cool, and building locker rooms, building a stadium, designing logos, hiring staff, recruiting more players than I could even imagine. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of players in a couple year turn. Winning a bunch of games out of the gate was cool. And then parlayed that into an opportunity to go to TCU and be director of recruiting and director of pro personnel there. So from recruiting to official visits, offers, unofficial visits, all the NFL and Canadian Football League liaison type stuff, team travel, all that kind of stuff. So that was a fun ride for a couple of years. We won a bucket load of games.
Yeah.
We went 23-3 the 2 seasons I was at TCU, and then at that point just realized that my wife and I got married in between season 1 and season 2 at TCU.
Yeah.
Realized that to be in this business required me probably having to move and kind of climb the coaching administrative ladder, so to speak. And so it gave me an opportunity to parlay that into some really cool opportunities to kind of get into the sports tech space, and been able to do that since 2004 and do it with a couple different companies, and then along the way start this kind of cool project called the Bedford Agency. And so I've been able to kind of go back into the time machine, so to speak, and pull from some of those things that I did do back in the day, and then pull those forward, modernize them a little bit, and then kind of be on the other side of the table, and then also keep some of my industry connections that I've built along the way. And so for me, it's a little bit of back to the future, but it's been fun.
Yeah. You talking about TCU? Did you work with Coach Gary Patterson?
I did.
So if you had 3 words to describe Coach Patterson, what 3 words would you use?
I would say intense. I would say passionate, and I would say savant. He's a defensive savant. He sees stuff that very few people cannot see or
Wow.
can see. So, but a very intense man. And it was early in his head coaching
Yeah.
career at the time when I was there. He was on year 2 at TCU, and at that point in time, I mean, kind of the jury was out. I got there after basically a 6-6 season, and so they were like, is this going to go down the tubes, or are we going to ride the rocket ship? And thankfully, I was on the rocket ship, and we took it off, and it was a lot of fun for the couple of years there. But very intense guy, very passionate guy, and then is definitely a savant around defense, and certainly learned a lot.
That's awesome.
While I was there, made a lot of connections. So it was good time in Fort Worth for sure.
Yeah. What are maybe a couple of wins for you so far for the Bedford Agency?
Well, I think there's a couple things that I would kind of point to in kind of the 3 kind of core areas that we've focused in, and those being consulting, the events, and then different aspects of kind of recruiting education and what that looks like. And I'll cover on a couple of them, not in any particular order.
Yeah.
The first is, from an events perspective, one of the cool things that we got an opportunity to do a couple of years back was bring an elite high school basketball camp to Oklahoma City with Jay Billis and his co-owner of his camp, John Searby. John's a good friend of mine, known John a long time. And they were looking to different models on how they were going to expand the footprint of their camp business. Jay, obviously, the lead analyst for ESPN. He's got a very robust name in that space. And so it was an opportunity for him to kind of grow his brand. They had been doing their camp in Charlotte for a number of years. In fact, I think they just celebrated their 5th year this year. And they wanted an opportunity to see if they could do this in other parts of the country and what would that look like. And so they needed a local operator to do that.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of people would think, well, we're going to do this in Dallas, we're going to do it in Houston, we're going to do it in Chicago, we're going to do it in Kansas City. I was like, I think we can do it here. I think we can do it in Oklahoma City. So that was really cool. It gave us some credibility that we had a big brand like Jay as a personality, and then the trust with friendship to be able to execute that. And so that was really cool with Jay and John, and we had really elite people as part of that event. Paul Biancardi, who's the lead director of college basketball scouting and recruiting for ESPN, was there. We had Alan Stein. Alan trained Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant, some of the who's just written a book. He's now a published speaker. They were all at this event. So that was really cool. And I look at that as kind of like really the model of being kind of a local operator and the things that we've kind of done on the event side. On the consulting side of things, a cool project that we took on about a year ago was kind of an early to market brand around sports design and creative branding called Varsity Partners. They were formerly called Centerfold Agency, but Varsity Partners, another company coincidentally out of Charlotte, that was looking for help when it comes to kind of sales, business development, kind of Horizon 2 kind of project development. What were they going to do in the space as they really started to build out a sports practice? They had done some work with some really cool brands like Carnival Cruise Lines and others, but they really wanted to go deep. And so having an opportunity just to open up the Rolodex, make some phone calls for them on their behalf, and kind of play kind of a sales consultant role for them. Another kind of cool project. And then I would say on the recruiting side, there's a bunch. There's probably more there than there is anything, just because we've been doing that a little longer in this. But, each one of the families that we've worked with have a really cool story. And none of them are the same in any, shape or form, but I'll give you two.
Yeah.
The first is, a young man that is actually entering his freshman year this fall, and he's actually in Phoenix, Arizona. His name is Rylan Stubbs. He's legitimately a top 30 to 50 miler, long distance runner in the country.
Wow.
He went to Campo Verde High School just outside of the Phoenix area, was recruited nationally, was offered by East Carolina, Iowa State, Oklahoma, just to name a few.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad is from here, was a high school teammate of mine for a little bit. And they really needed counsel at an early age. They knew that Ryan had won a state championship in cross country as a sophomore or finished runner up or something like that. So they weren't really sure, like, what are we sitting on a rocket ship or not,
Yeah.
And I remember one of the first conversations we had was really about kind of getting them exposure to a couple places. In fact, they were taking a family trip up to Oregon, wanted to go to University of Oregon, and wanted to make contact with coaches at a very early age. And I just remember, kind of walking them through, okay, this is what that experience is going to be like. And
Yeah.
Oregon track is kind of the crescendo, right, of track and field and Hayward Field and all the things that go with it. And so, to see their family go all the way through that. He just got done running at the open road mile with Adidas Boost in Boston 2 weeks ago. He's won, I'm probably not going to get this right, but at 6 to 8 state championships in Arizona.
Oh my goodness.
And then just committed, actually going to run for one of the hometown Division I schools, Grand Canyon University. Going to stay at home. Decided, spurned all those other offers that he had to stay home, which is a big coup for them.
Yeah.
And so that's really fun to kind of see, someone go through the process at a really elite level, advise the family through that, provide the resources and information on how to do that. That was kind of a really cool one.
That's awesome.
That's kind of, we talk a lot about football and basketball and some of these other sports, but I wanted to kind of give you the same really applies to every sport, right?
Yeah.
The second would be, I had a family that they were really interested in kind of the academic side of things. Son was a good player, ended up finishing at Cassidy here in Oklahoma City, and had previously gone to Westmore High School, and they knew that they had an opportunity for him to possibly play in college, but weren't sure. And he was a kind of a fringe Division I kid, got offered by Air Force, and had some plenty of Division II offers, a couple of 1AA offers that were out there. You got some preferred walk-on offers that came, and we really, I remember at a very early point in that process, really talking to them about what does he want to do when he gets done with college? Like what's the plan there?
Yeah.
And I remember them saying, he's a really good student. He was a 4.0 kid, one of those kind of guys, 30 plus on the ACT, and they said, well, he wants to be an engineer. And I thought, well, I'm probably out of my league here already, because he's already thinking about being an engineer. I was just worried about what I was going to do on Friday night when I was at 17, but he's already thinking about becoming an engineer. And we ended up, I said, you've got family and different things that are in Colorado. One of the top engineering schools in the country that plays a really good brand of football is a school called Colorado School of the Mines. You got to really take advantage and look at this. And so on that trip to Air Force, they went up to the Boulder area, went to Colorado School of the Mines, loved it, fell in love with the school, got offered a good scholarship to go play there. His career, he spent 5 years there, redshirted. The football thing kind of, it wasn't a perfect, scenario when he got into school, but the engineering piece of it was awesome, right? And so football kind of bounced a little bit. They had a head coaching change in the middle of that process, and he ended up finishing his career playing baseball as a redshirt senior, having a phenomenal kind of redshirt senior season as just a walk-on to the baseball team. But he finished his degree, and now he has got a job right out of college. He's moving to Boston. He's gonna work with one of the top gun manufacturers in the country, and it allows
Man.
him to kind of pair his passions. He loved hunting, he loved fishing, he
Wow.
loved outdoor sports. He's got this engineering degree, and then he's probably going to make more money than you and me both combined right out of the
Wow.
gate, because
Yeah.
now he's going to be designing new guns and different things for the sporting and fishing world. And I mean, how cool a story is that? I mean, it's
Yeah.
just awesome to see him just kind of, at an early age identify with that, but to be a small part of that process and giving them counsel on where to go.
Mhm.
I mean, now that kid has not just thought about a school for 4 years of playing, but the next 40 years of his life are now impacted. And
Yeah.
so those are two great examples of kind of one that's getting on the cusp of starting his college career and one who's now finished it.
Yeah.
And they're in, different parts of that journey, but being part of that's really kind of fun. It's cool to be part of it, cool to still play a role in impacting kids and families' lives. And so that's kind of brings us full circle. So it's been fun.
That's awesome. And you say you played a small part. As I'm listening to this, I will say that you played a huge part. I feel what's important is you actually, it's like, hey, what are you going to do after college? It's not just about athletics.
Sure.
And he's like engineering. You're like, okay, well, here's some options. And the Colorado School of Mines is a great engineering school. Obviously, I work with engineers. I think our CEO graduated from there and played football from there, and some geologists too. However, the part that you played, you say it's small. That's probably the biggest part. If we were to bring him on here, it'd probably be his defining moment. One of his defining moments,
maybe,
is to go use you to consult with his parents, and in that direction.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I think him and his dad, mom and dad, would say that is I mean, they had never heard of it, had no idea, was not even, we're totally thinking a completely different direction.
Yeah.
And now they look back on it and go, it's probably the best decision we made of our lives. And,
that's awesome, man.
it could have gone sideways. They could have gone up there and not liked it.
For sure.
And my job's not for them to, make them, a decision or call a coach on their behalf or anything. My job's, I look at it when I think about recruiting is just to place ideas, give them perspective, give them things to think about. And we've tried to templatize and process out kind of that whole, those steps through the recruiting thing. And this is one of those where you look back on it and go, they made a decision for 40 years, not 4 years.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool. And that's one thing that, we did learn when I was at TCU. Gary was a big believer, and he used that phrase a lot. In fact, if you follow TCU in recruiting, they use that line a lot in recruiting. Is not 40, or not 4 but 40, or 40 not 4. They'll use some variation of that. And it's really about finding a place that is going to have those connections, those relationships, and the education that's going to carry you when your knees and ankles and shoulders break, right? Which they always will. But that education, that network of people, those relationships, hopefully those are with you for a really long time.
Yeah. God, that's so brilliant. I honestly, when I was playing soccer, I wish we had a firm, an agency that you had, because I'm 39, I'm close to the same age as you are.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that. But I mean, it would have been so useful to have someone with all that knowledge that you could just go to and just use.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, there's an abundance of information out there, but synthesizing it for parents is really difficult because they've been brainwashed that, if we do this, 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 and this, if we travel to every out-of-state tournament, it's just going to equal, scholarships. And, the reality is, for every dollar you're spending on those travel away, hotel, meals, gas, etc., go put 50 cents or $1 of that same dollar into a fund and save it for for college, right? Because the reality of it is, you're probably not getting a full scholarship. Even if you do get a scholarship, it's probably not a full scholarship, unless you play a couple of sports, and only those couple of sports at a very elite level. And then outside of that, most of your money's coming from academics or other types of agencies. And I think we've created a culture where sports is prominent, which is great. I do enjoy that.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's a balance.
Absolutely.
And I think we've kind of gotten out of kilter on what that balance should look like.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. So your moment was from at 10 years old, Reunion Arena, popcorn, ticket sales, to the Red Hawks, to building a program at Sun Nazarene, TCU. Now you got your own agency that's 3 years old and thriving, and it's growing. So, how does a high performer like you? What are some of your morning habits?
Well, I probably run 4 or 5 times a week, and a lot of that's not crazy early, but I usually am
Yeah.
getting up and doing that at least during the summertime.
Hmm.
So I'll try to get a workout in, in the morning time. But if I think about habits specifically, for me, I'm when I'm not traveling, I'm trying to do as much shuttling to school as I possibly can. I just feel
Yeah.
like that's one dad thing that I can do. So I'm trying to get my kids to school as best I can. We kind of divide the responsibilities on the with the girls, and my wife does the bulk of it. But I'll play
Yeah.
my little sliver of being the Uber driver in the mornings and getting them to their place, and then try to get depending on that schedule, and that's obviously in the in the fall or spring semesters when the kids are in place. And then probably like all of us, I'm checking in on the work stuff that's come in
Hmm.
over the overnight, and
Yeah.
because I do also work for a global company, it is
Right.
it is coming all night long, and then try to get cranking. And then school year, I'll probably work out midday, and then in the summer times it's been a little warm, so I'm trying to get that work in the morning, and then let the girls kind of get some sleep, some more sleep time.
Yeah.
But every day's different when you got kids,
Yeah.
so there's sometimes where you're getting up and shuttling them to camp, or you got a doctor's appointment. So, but I try as best I can to be um, to at least in the mornings, trying to keep it quiet in the house if
Yeah.
they're sleeping, and do my thing upstairs in my office. And
That's cool,
but
man.
I think we got a decent little routine going there.
Yeah. Right on,
It's
man.
working. 16 years, and
Yeah.
my oldest is getting ready to turn 15. So we've got
Wow.
the system a little bit down. It's not perfect. It's a
It's
it's
evolving.
like practicing
Yeah.
medicine. We're practicing parenting. So
That's awesome, man. What are some questions, maybe two questions that you wish people would ask you, but no one ever asked?
yeah, I think I think for students, kind of early in career people, they want to jump to the end result. They want to jump to, like, oh, I want your job now, and I can appreciate that. I did the same thing.
Mhm.
I think just understanding kind of how to take some steps in the process,
Yeah.
in one's career, whatever career it is, and just being intentional and methodical about that, and looking at all of the different aspects of again, if I use engineering as a term,
Hmm.
they could work for an oil and gas company in engineering, they could work
Yeah.
for an architect in engineering, or they could go make ammunition and guns.
Yeah.
There's lots of different elements of it, right?
Right.
Well, so I think just, and then the steps within those careers that each of those have. So I think asking intentional questions around that is something that I would advocate for, is making sure that you're really thinking through that process, and you're looking at kind of the full career, career journey. And a lot of kids will ask me, well, I want to work in sports. And one of the first questions I always ask them is, do you want to work on the team side or the non-team side? Well, we
Yeah.
want to work on the team side. And I'm like, okay, before I go down that path, do you even understand what the non-team side means? Well, no, not really. I'm like, so if I could get you a job at Nike, would you go to work at Nike? Well, yeah. Okay. Do you like golf? If I could get you a job at Callaway, would you work at Callaway? Well, yeah, I love Callaway. Like, I go to
Yeah.
Callaway golf
Yeah.
clubs. Or if you could, do you like to run? Yeah. Well, if I could get you a job at Peloton, is that working in sports? And so, or do you like
Yeah.
technology? And you can keep going down the list, right? And so, I think that's maybe a little extension of your question, but I think those, kind of being well rounded in that kind of career decision making process, is one that not enough people early in career, I think, are asking the right questions around that, and then
Mhm.
they're assuming that they're going to get done, and that there's just going to be rainbows and lollipops waiting for them at the end of it, and not realizing that you might have to go intern, you might have to go volunteer. There may be some things that you need to do along the way. That's the first thing. And I think that the second thing that I would maybe that doesn't get asked enough is probably just the balance of your family and your work, and how do you do those things. And I fall victim to that, from time to time. There'll be times where, I'm not carrying my load, and my wife lets me know about it, and you need that. I think that's important as a married couple, is that you have your ability to kind of, give some positive criticism to, how are you spending your time. But I do think there's a way to balance that. That's one thing that we did, when I was at TCU. We realized that we couldn't have the life that my wife and I wanted, and we made it a tenet of our marriage to be based here in Oklahoma City, close to our parents, so that our kids could have grandparents active in their lives. And that means you miss some opportunities potentially because you don't live in New York or London or the Bay or LA or Chicago or whatnot. But it proves to be very beneficial for the next generation, my kids, and where they're going, and maybe future generations, right? And so I think, and I look at that now with, even trying to kind of juggle a couple different, an emerging job, an emerging business that we're creating here, but also my other roles. Balancing those can be tricky. There's times where I get out of whack. And I've taken on too much. But for the most part, I think, there's a way to do this where you don't get overextended, and you do provide balance. And I think people need to be asking that question to themselves and or others, right? How do you really go about doing that? And there's no situation's perfect. And I'm not going to say that I'm perfect, because I'm fully admitting that I screw this up too. But I do think that, trying to be balanced about that is one that I would make sure that, as you're thinking about the goals, the ambitions, the things that you want to do, is it a way that, you can do that without, compromising kind of that family piece of it. And I'll give you an example. While I mentioned, we've done a couple of events, and those have been really cool and aspirational and whatnot. They've taken a lot of time. And so then then that compromises your family. So we've just had to look at what we're doing within our agency and say, well, maybe we're not going to do a lot of events. Maybe we're going to do consulting, and we're going to do recruiting, and because that we can blend into our weekly schedule, kind of that weekly body of work, and kind of protect those kind of precious weekends that are typically family time. So it's been kind of thinking about it in that context. But those are kind of a couple of questions that kind of come to mind that I think people should be asking those things.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, because I was actually fascinated. Like, okay, so married 16 years, 3 years into this Bedford Agency. I was like, how does him and his wife do this? So
yeah. Well, it's not. I mean, it's certainly not easy. And I have an awesome wife who kicks me in the tail from time to time and tells me when I'm doing good and tells me when I'm doing bad. And you need that.
Absolutely.
And I think as a man, you're very, business kind of ego driven. And I think you have to have a partner who is willing to give you balance in your perspective. And I always say this, I needed to be a girl dad. Because if I wasn't, like, I would be all sorts of crazy. I'd have the TV would be on ESPN 24/7. I would know nothing about anything else that was going on in life. Right. So for me, like, I need that. I need the compassion that my girls have. I need the love and the faith and the trust that my wife has. If I didn't have that, I mean, there would be no way that I would be able to even, think about having kind of the full perspective, because I know that I naturally kind of tilt far one way, right? I mean, I have like a body of interest and, so forth. And so, I mean, that's the hard part. I mean, that's the joy, but what makes being married, that's what's tough, right? Is because you have to you have to be able to balance and offload, different things. And, us as guys, I mean, we'd be all sorts of crazy. That's why your spouse has got to play that role. And I mean, thank goodness that my wife has, invested what she's done into my kids, because I look at my two daughters and look and say they're certainly partially a reflection of me, but they're also a big reflection of my wife.
Yeah. Wow.
Because I have traveled and I have taken on some of those things, and those sacrifices come at a price. But we're trying to figure out a good balancing spot to that now in our lives, and sometimes you have to do some things early in career. I had to travel a bunch when my oldest was really little, and so we had to kind of sacrifice a little bit there. Now we're a little more in a balanced kind of travel schedule. Still gets a little wonky from time to time, but having that, I think that perspective is pretty important.
That's awesome, man. You mentioned earlier about kids and volunteer work, what they need to be doing. How do you give back to society? How do you contribute?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just passed on a little bit of the baton, and I'm kind of in the process of just trying to figure out what's the next thing. But I've sat on a board role at my alma mater for 6 years at Southern Nazarene, and that's been pretty cool to kind of see the inner workings. And there's a lot of, you're kind of a glorified volunteer when you sit on a board. Anyways, that's kind of part of that responsibility is to be there and be an active mentor, and provide that. And so that's been a pretty cool kind of 6-year body of work.
Yeah.
And now the next chapter, I don't know what that looks like. There'll be something new that I can kind of, give back and invest into. There's lots of opportunities that are out there. And so in fact, I've asked a couple people, what's the next spot? What's the next place that I should dig into?
Yeah.
But doing that in a balanced way.
Yeah.
And we're certainly involved in our church and doing things, in that area. But there'll be something, but I just don't know what that looks like yet. But it's July 1. My board seat just expired on Sunday, so I think I got a little bit of time to figure out what's the next chapter. But I would encourage anybody, whether it's a formal board seat or it's a more of a, just you're volunteering, whether it's at the food bank or whatever it may be. There are lots of really cool opportunities for people to get plugged into.
Yeah.
And I think having that gives you another life perspective that helps you do your day job, whatever the day job is. So I think they're important. And I think, you should have something there that you can give your expertise to. They're needed for sure.
Absolutely, man. If you go back in time, what would you tell your younger self? What's one thing?
I think, the area that I would probably spend a little bit more time into, it's just, I have a lot of great relationships around the country that I've built kind of through work. But I'd probably continue to invest in those personal relationships that are here locally, building some of those. I think those become more important to you as you get a little bit older. And they've been, I had to go through a period there where I was, I moved out of state, start to travel a whole bunch. And so it's like, man, that body of work or some of those friendships you kind of lose touch with, those are things that sometimes you can't get those back. Fortunately, we've been able to claw a bunch of those back and rekindle a lot of those things. But, I would tell myself to, don't take that lightly, be purposeful in those relationships, do everything you can. And that's a weak point for me, just candidly. I mean, that's an area where sometimes I don't put the attention to it that I should, the old saying, to have friends, you have to be a friend, kind of one of those tips. I think that's, sometimes you have to do things that are unnatural and be, you have to extend past the midway point, and sometimes in your life. And so I'd probably tell myself that if I was, commenting. But the other thing would be, marry a good woman, marry someone better than yourself.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've been able to do that. And so, I'd continue to thankfully I've been on the right track when it comes to that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, I did that. I married a great woman, so good advice. I
Yeah.
appreciate that,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely.
What's the path forward for you personally, and then also the Bedford Agency?
Well, I mean, I think, if I just think about me personally, we're at a really cool part in our family's life with my kids, and
Hmm.
cherish the next, you know, 10 years, whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
15 years, really. I mean, they'll be with you, and never quit. You never quit being a parent,
Yep.
as the analogy goes. But, we're in some precious times here where, um, we've got to be, parenting is a full combat role right now as a parent,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's a lot of influences advent of social media. It's different, and it was different for parents and their parents and so forth. But I think being a parent of girls is has a different level of complexity that is not for the faint of heart. I'll just
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
But I think we also have an opportunity here and it's pretty finite, with a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old that, you know, at some point in time, unless the good Lord comes back, they're, in the next couple of years, they're going to be moving on to college or moving on to high school or moving
Yeah.
on to junior high or whatever those things are. And those life transitions are really important. And so we spend a lot of time kind of talking about those things with our
Mm.
girls and preparing them kind of, here's what that's going to look like, and here's, what you expect, and
Yeah.
here's what we expect, and here's the kind of expectation when it comes to, grades and boys and all of those kinds of things. And so those are, they may not be real cool for a podcast, but I think they're
Mhm.
pretty real, and
Yeah.
I think they're, as a parent, that's life. You need to
Yeah.
be thinking about it. If you're not talking about it, then I think you're doing a big disservice.
I
Like,
agree.
you're just trying to let the world, you know, uh, parent your kids. I mean, that's
Right.
not going to happen. That's first and foremost. The number one priority is my wife and my two daughters. Um, for me, I'm pretty blessed work wise. Got a lot of cool things that, I'm able to touch in a couple different areas of my life, and
Mhm.
so that's been great. Whether it's being looking at new responsibility, new solutions, all those kinds of things, and then for the Bedford Agency, it's really trying to just organically grow this, in a fairly methodical way,
Yeah.
being pretty smart about what we're doing here. We've kind of said from day one that we wanted to grow this organically. We didn't want to have to, go raise some cash or, take out a second mortgage or do any of those
Mhm.
kinds of things. The goal here all along has been to kind of build this very pragmatically in a way that, over time, can be an income supplement and
Mhm.
can ultimately grow to where we've got, full staff and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But because we're not in a rush, means we just need to be smart with the types of things that we are going to be focused in on.
Right.
So I think you'll see us do more kind of sports business, kind of industry consulting.
Mhm.
That continues to be an area where we're getting more interest. People are wanting to, whether it's a special project, whether it's sales, whether it's a different type of product that people are wanting to take to market. I think there's interest there in filling that void as a
Yeah.
consultant in the market. And there are a lot of people that do that. And so we're certainly not unique in that. But, um, you know, uh, think between me and contacts that I have, able to really help the right kinds of companies that need
Mhm.
that kind of assistance. We'll be really particular with events and camps and things like that we take on. They'll be very laser focused on the things that we want to do there.
Yeah.
Again, going back to kind of that work life balance and what that looks like, I think that will be one that, will be really smart. There are some areas here locally and kind of regionally and nationally that we're looking at. but without having to take on a bunch of overhead and whatnot, will probably be pretty prescriptive.
Yeah.
And then when we think about recruiting education and partnerships and affiliates, there's a big body of work there that's probably the most mature as we think about it. So we're looking at some different nonprofit and for-profit partnerships
Nice.
there. We're looking at um, uh, really kind of templatizing a lot of the material that we've got and putting those into more formats for co-curricular development. We're looking at various other kind of I call them affiliate partners, different ministries, different affiliations, different groups that we could partner with to kind of round out the cycle. So we've announced some of those this spring and summer, whether it be something like Speak Life Ministries here in Oklahoma City or Athletic Inc. on the performance side. We're meeting with different types of nonprofits that are looking at the various other elements of kind of recruiting education and what that looks like, whether it be ACT, SAT prep, whether it be different type of performance goals. So I think you'll see us build that out. I do believe there's a pretty big opportunity for kind of recruiting education as a cottage industry. And so whether we create a separate brand or we build that under the Bedford Agency brand as we move forward, that is obviously a decision we have to make at some point in time. I could very easily see that kind of being its separate kind of whole entity. But those are kind of where we're focused. But being dad and being husband's number one, and then business stuff I think kind of naturally comes along with it,
right?
Because that obviously puts groceries on the table and a warm bed and a roof over the head. But it's it's in a good spot right now for sure.
That's awesome. Athlete Inc. I know Kuhn Vega. He does the design work, the branding for them.
Okay,
and then,
cool.
Coach K, obviously.
I do.
And do you do work with Energy, professional soccer team here?
Yes. I don't want to overstate it, but yes, there's a couple different things that we're working on now that I can't discuss.
Right.
And then there's some things that we have discussed. I mean, most recently, the Oklahoma City Energy and Energy Assist, led by Jason Hawkins, who's their general manager, they ended up just putting in in a kind of an interactive soccer wall with the city of Bethany in one of their kind of underserved parks in kind of the southeast side of Bethany. Okay. And that was just through a relationship that I have with the mayor of Bethany, and that's cool. And connected them. And so yeah, we're in discussions on some really cool things.
That's awesome.
I think highly of what they're doing here as just kind of a community ambassador here in the city. And so they, like several other entities, have been really cool to work with. So it's been fun.
Right on. Couple more questions. I want to be conscious of your time.
Yeah, no problem.
How does Bryan want to be remembered?
Well, I think that's a heavy question for today, but I'll say this, and I've certainly learned this, from my wife more than anything, which is, my number one responsibility is, to be a man of faith, to be remembered for my faith, and to be, husband and father kind of first. If I do that, then I think I've accomplished a bunch, because that is certainly where there's kind of a legacy component to that. From a work perspective, I mean, people are going to know I was, involved in sports and media and worked for Fortune 50 companies and all that stuff. And so there'll be some really cool logos that will be associated with my name. But the bigger logos are certainly my faith, being Desiree's husband, being Tessa and Sadie's dad. Those are much bigger logos, so to speak, in my world. And so I think I'd rather just be a great dad and a good husband. And those are areas that I always need to work on.
Yeah.
But I think if I can do that, then the rest of it, okay, that's cool. It's icing on the cake.
Yeah. That's awesome. after our first meeting, I talked to my wife, and I was like, man, he is a big believer in his faith, and he's a big time family man. I wrote that and I circled it, big time family man.
Good.
So yeah, that's
then I made an impression then.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
You did, and keep that up. Like you said, the rest of it, icing on the cake. It's going to happen. You're doing great things. I hear great things about you from other people because we don't have a research team, so I go out and do my own research.
Yeah, it's called internet stalking.
That or trolling. But I've been weeding my feed, so
that's good.
I get down to intentional.
Yes.
Who I want to follow.
Yeah.
What do I want to see?
Yeah.
There's a reason why I do all that. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for your time. Oh, before we go, no cell numbers. How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably the easiest. Our website's really easy to remember. TheBedfordAgency.com is how people can contact the company. You can look me up on anything. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter.
Yeah.
Just type in at Bryan_Bedford. You can probably find me on just about anything. Twitter's the handiest. And so either at Bryan_Bedford or at Bedford Agency, you'll get to me, get to us, however you want to say it. So I'm happy to talk to anybody. Love doing these, and they're fun to kind of share what we're up to. And we're on just we're just a kind of an entrepreneurial startup here. It's been kind of fun to kind of see how we just evolve it, and so love to have conversations with anybody that wants to partner or just has a question about recruiting or sports business. Love to talk to people about that.
That's awesome. And you can also sign up for the newsletter on your website.
You can, yeah. Just drop me a note and I'll add you to it. And we try to send that out every couple of weeks. And hopefully it's full of some nuggets in there.
It is.
And probably a little propaganda, but that's normal for newsletters, right?
Hey, man. Dude, you're doing a great job. Wish you and your family agency all the best. So
awesome.
One last question. Bryan Bedford, do you approve this podcast?
I approve it. It's been awesome.
My name is Wong Lam, and I approve this podcast.
Thanks,
brother. You so much. That's what I really appreciate about you, Bryan. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing many more successful posts about your student athletes, your agency. I believe in you, man.